back here at Washoe Lake, Nevada. Last time we were here in an early trim session, this model hit a post right over there and wrecked the front end of the leading edge, which has now been repaired. I do have here an RDT system so that I can DT it if things get in trouble. I'll push a button on my little transmitter here and that'll flip the stab up. Inside here you can't see, I have a BMK GPS locator. I used to use RF locators. I'm just getting used to this system. So I'm carrying 2 batteries and 2 receivers, probably about 5 extra grams, which is a weight penalty, but the good news is I should get the airplane back. So I put in my usual 10 by 1/16, 10 by 1/16 rubber motor, 9.8 grams, and I've got about 250 turns in here. I loaded the electronics, not doing any test glides. It may have changed the CG. Let's see what happens. Okay, so the model is having a tendency to spiral into the right, and I've put here what we call a gurney flap. It's just 1/16 square balsa glued to the underside of the trailing edge of the inboard wing where it's turning. Turns out there was already a gurney flap there. Maybe it wasn't big enough. I looked at the right thrust, and it looked like there was maybe a little bit too much right thrust. So on the Gizmo Geezer, I took 1/2 turn, which is about, and I went counterclockwise. So that's taking out about 1.25 degrees of right thrust. So I like how the right wing was not dipping in that time. By the way, I do want to make an admission for the record. I breached a cardinal rule, which is making 2 changes at once. I extended the gurney flap and I also reduced the right thrust. Really should only do 1 change at a time, because otherwise you don't know which change was effective and to what extent. Could be the combination, it could be either one. The plane landed way over here and I couldn't see exactly where it was, so I thought I'll give my locator a chance to find it. And here's the handheld unit. I don't know if you can see it. It said it was 56 meters away and it led me right to the airplane, so that was good. So we're good on that. That last flight was 250 turns, so I'm going to wind it up this time 400 turns, get it up a little higher and see what's going on before I make any more changes to the flight surfaces or the thrust line. Okay, so a couple of things I want to mention. First of all, I've switched to what I call stupid hat. It has a brim here, and that helps protect my ears and my face as the sun gets stronger in the UV. The problem with these hats is that they make about a 20-point reduction in your apparent IQ. but they do work. Got to watch out though when you launch that you don't get your stab on this here. I also wanted to show you the winder I'm using. It's a Reese winder. It winds 10 to 1 in a reverse fashion. Mine has a built-in torque meter here, so it's very important to wind to torque, particularly as you go up the ladder and observe the performance. The last launch was at about, well, I wound to about 1.5 inch-ounces of torque, and you can wind this motor probably up to about 7 inch-ounces before it'll break. Another thing I wanted to point out was this is the little transmitter for the RDT. So I have it on my wrist here, so it's handy, tethered to my wrist. There's a red button here, and if you see the thing starting to get into trouble, you can push this button and it will burn through a rubber band here, which is a dental rubber band holding the DT line taut. There's about a couple second delay because the little nichrome wire in here that heats up to sever the rubber band has to heat up. Also, I found that pushing the button twice or pushing it harder does not result in an earlier DT. In that last flight, I noticed that after the turns had unwound, the plane started to glide left. So it could have been the wind currents, but I've increased the stab tilt here. That will affect the turn and the glide. It will not affect the power phase at all. So I haven't changed the incidence. One more thing I want to mention is that I've built probably 6 of these Three Nite P-30s. Typically, when I take them out, they take 1 or 2 minor adjustments and they fly great. This one is approaching, it looks nice. It's one of my nicer looking ones, but it's approaching what I call dog status, in that sometimes in the free flight hobby, no matter what you do, what adjustments you make, you just can't get a model to fly as it should, even though it's a proven design. You have the CG set, everything is just the way it should be, but for whatever reason you keep making changes and you never quite get there. I'm not to that stage yet where I'll give up on this model, but I'm getting close. Some of my friends have what they call a Viking funeral, in that they save up their dogs, they put them in a pile, and then they burn them. That's probably not a good idea from a pollution standpoint, also from a wildfire standpoint. So I probably wouldn't do that. I would just save this model so I could scavenge off the pieces. If we don't see a MAX coming up pretty soon here, this baby is done. Okay, so that last flight was 600 turns, 2 inch-ounces of torque. I was not happy with the beginning of the launch when it was diving. The glide now is a little tight. Boy, we've had nothing but trouble with this plane, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to wind it. So I have my sport utility vehicle here, and I built this stooge. It just clamps on the back. It helps me avoid having to hammer stuff into the ground, which it's hard to get down on your knees and hammer spikes and put tether lines out and all that, and then you trip over the lines. So there are all kinds of ways to build a stooge that goes on your tailgate. So Anyway, I have one that pivots a little bit. That helps because you don't want to put too much stress back here on the fuselage if you're moving. So let's do a winding operation. I have the gizmo geezer here, so I take the prop off. And since I'm going to wind up to maybe 1,000 turns, I'm worried about potentially the motor breaking and then damage to the tissue of this fuselage or the other structure. Here's the winding attachment. Notice I have a red ribbon on it because inevitably when I drop it, that will help me find it. That attaches to the sleeved clevis here, which is part of the gizmo geezer setup. Helps if you can see it. Okay, so then I have a piece of 5/8 inch outer diameter plastic pipe here, which is my blast tube. You can see there's a bayonet end on there that locks on to the motor peg. So this is the way we install it. By the way, 5/8 inch is about the smallest that will allow the gizmo geezer hardware to go through. So we pull it out, get all the way back there. Oh, by the way, I have my motor peg a little forward on this one, so the blast tube is a little bit too long, but that's okay. So we're going to hook this up here. It's locked on. You step back, at least 5 times the length of the rubber motor unwound. If you're in competition, I'm not, so I'm just going to give it a reasonable amount of stretch here. And so we're going to put in 500 turns and then walk in halfway and do the rest. So remember, this is a Reese winder. I'm going to wind reverse. Sometimes cell phone cameras reverse everything in your playback, so I'm not sure how it'll show up, but 1, 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 turns, so that's 10 to 1, so that's 500 turns. So now we'll put in the other ones gradually walking in. 60, 70, 80, 90, 1,000. And we're at about 2.5 inch-ounces of torque. The torque would spike at the very end as we get near braking torque. 1,500 turns, it's really going to spike up. So take the winder off. Extractor, which is just a piece of 062 wire with a handle on it here. Blast tube out. Extractor off. Winding attachment off. Gizmo geezer prop attached to the sleeved clevis. 1/2 turn, or maybe it's 1/4. Notice I have a orange here that tells me that's on the top side, otherwise my thrust lines will be wrong. Done. Okay, so that last flight was okay, about 1 minute and 10 seconds. It's circling too tight. I'm just going to keep going up the ladder and see what happens. So now I have 1,200 turns and 3 inch-ounces of torque. Notice it's all wound, but it's in a freewheel mode. So to put it in the power mode, you need to put 5 turns in here, but what I normally do is pull the prop out to get the spinner engaged, and then you can kind of hold it in place. Of course, now that I'm on video, I'm not doing it very well. Or you can do this. Okay, so there we have, put in 5 turns. Otherwise, when you launch it, it'll just free spin and go down to the ground. That's it.
The hell is it?
That last flight was about 90 seconds. We're inching up to 2 minutes, which is a max in the P-30 event. The turn circle's a little tight, I think. Also, on launch, it was right on the edge of a power stall. In other words, it was starting to do this, hang on the prop, and then it recovered. So, because of that, I added about a half degree, actually a full degree of down thrust, and I used the 10 o'clock screws. That took out a little bit of the right thrust. This is 1,400 turns, 4.5 inch-ounces of torque. Let's see what it does. That was quite a retrieval. Winded. It's always important to drink plenty of fluid. I'm drinking Gatorade. I have a nice fruit punch flavor that's my favorite, even though it's pink colored. So that flight was disappointing. I went up on torque quite a bit from, what was it, 2 to 4.5 inch-ounces. And you can see again it's starting to stand on the prop, which indicates more down thrust is needed. I already have about 4 degrees. I'll probably put in another degree of down thrust. You can trade right thrust and down thrust. In other words, sometimes instead of putting down thrust, which ultimately holds down your climb, you can instead put in a little right thrust. But as you know, I'm having this corkscrew problem, so I don't want to put any more right thrust in. Got about 1 or 2 degrees there. Also, I'm thinking that these gurney flaps, even though they're supposed to lift the inboard wing, this wing up and keep the plane from spiraling this way, they also, in addition to having lift, they also could create drag, forcing it to the right. So what I may do, I'm going to go back to my rule, change one thing at a time. So let's first do a little bit more down thrust, see what happens. And if it's still circling too tight, I'm going to take off one of the 2 gurney flaps here. They're just tacked on with thin Duco cement, so with a little acetone they'll come right off. No damage to the tissue. So the wind's coming up, unfortunately. It's probably 3 to 4 miles an hour. That means long chases, but I do have my RDT here, so I can terminate the flight if the chase looks like it's going to be too long. Last time also, I think the plane got caught in a downer a bit. In other words, you have hot air that rises, but that air has to come from somewhere. And if you get out of that thermal to the side, now you're in down air. And that's going to suck the plane down. So the flight was well short of 90 seconds. You should see my other Three Nite P-30s. They fly like you can't believe. One of them will consistently do 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Like I said, this one is somewhat of a dog, but I'm not going to give up yet. Okay, so I put in another degree of down thrust, and the breeze is really starting to come up. Pretty soon I'm going to have to stop because of the long retrievals. I suppose I could DT early. So this is about 1,450 turns, 5 inch-ounces of torque. The motor has been wound, what, 6 or 8 times now. The early winds at almost no torque don't fatigue the motor, but the last couple of winds, when you're getting near braking torque, which is about 7 for this motor, 7.5, really starts to fatigue it. So what that means is that because of the hysteresis of the rubber, you're not going to get as much energy output, let's put it that way. Stated in layman's terms, the rubber motor gets wimpy. Let's see what this does. All right, I'm back from a Herculean trek to recover this model. I did put in about 1 degree of right thrust, and that no more down thrust, although turning the 2 o'clock screw probably puts in a little down thrust. Anyway, the launch was at 1,500 turns, 5 inch-ounces of torque. I believe the last launch before that was also 5 inch-ounces, but I had to wind more turns to get the same torque because of motor fatigue. So the pattern was better. It climbed out of what a near power stall and got up there. Obviously it got some thermal assistance. As I could see it was going to go a long way, I started walking towards it, which is always a good idea. However, watching the model, I then stepped on a big rock, which is not a good idea. Then I looked down, I looked back up, I recovered sight of the model while it was still flying. It started to get too close to Highway 395 back here. That is the main interstate highway between Reno, Nevada and Carson City, which is the capital. It's a neat little state capital. It's only about 35,000 population, very pretty. Anyway, the models are never as far away as you think they are. It ended up landing at least 100 meters before the highway. As I was walking, I eventually, when it landed, I got a line of sight, looking behind me and forward to make sure I had 2 bearing points so I could at least use a visual that way. The mistake I made was not, my wife's taking the videos with my phone. I should have taken her phone so we could communicate. That was my fault. The video, she says, the plane is out of sight. It's just a camera. It's just an S23 Samsung camera, so you're not going to be able to see the flight, but apparently it was a little over 4 minutes. I decided I should DT it. I thought it was getting too near the highway, so I gave it the radio DT signal with my little transmitter here, and that operated correctly, and it came down. At that point, I looked at my GPS receiver here, and it said I was 250 meters roughly from the landing site. Seemed like more than that, so I think I'd already walked 150 meters, walked another 250. The GPS is not as accurate as I would like. You still have to rely on some visual. There may be some detuning for military reasons. They don't want GPS to be too accurate, so it still seems to get you close enough to get eye shot of where it is. I walked past it. I thought I had a good visual line of sight. I walked past it, and the GPS told me I was increasing my distance away from it. So I said, whoa, I'm walking the wrong way. The arrow doesn't seem to point exactly where the plane is sometimes. The arrow that gives you the direction. So anyway, got the plane back. When I DT'd it, I estimated it was probably around, 100, 150 feet high. They're never as high as you think, so let's say it's 100 feet high. It DT'd it around 4 minutes, so if I had not DT'd it, it would probably have been a 5 to 8 minute flight. In a contest, there's no reason to do that. I just wanted to see, test out the GPS, see how long of a flight I could get on a reasonable trimming. I think that's enough for today because I'm pooped. If I made any more changes, I think I might take one of these gurney flaps. I have about 6 inches here. I think I would take this one off. I think at this point it's pulling more than I want. I might actually take an inch off and then take another inch off. That will be on the next trim session. Turns out the stab tilt was about right, and so when I DT'd it, that little piece of 1/64 plywood went away. Before I put the model away, I'll glue that back on, and I think that's a reasonably successful day. Normally, I said I can trim a model like this in 2 or 3 little changes, so sometimes when you build a model, it's just touchy. And that's what this one is so far. I think it has saved itself from a Viking funeral. Thank you.